Halloween, my favourite time of year. Time to come out of the broom closet and put your feet up and just be yourself. Okay, it's not my hat. I don't normally wear this. It's a little bit Harry Potter. I am the only person who's never watched or read the Harry Potter books. Nipples. Come on, you're a better actress than me. You put your hat on. Put the hat on. She's a beauty. She won't wear the hat on. Right, slightly nonchalant. Ah, Halloween at last. Time to just be yourself. Time to just be yourself. Hello and welcome to The Witch in the Woods, and in today's episode I'd like to talk about ghosts, spirits and ancestors. Sit. Oh, sit. Sit down. Sit. Don't sniff bums. Do not sniff bums. So the first question to ask really is, what are ghosts and spirits, and what do they have to do with elves, with fairies and with ancestors? And at this point you may want to know if anyone has ever seen a ghost. Well, the truth is, yes, I have. I have seen a ghost, and I've experienced many more ghosts in my life. So first I'll tell you about my experiences. In fact, this video is probably going to have quite a lot of information that is personal, as I can only really speak about what I've experienced and speak for myself. So if you've got any of your own experiences, then add them to the mix. It's good to talk about things that are quite taboo in our society, and in our scientific age it's not rational to talk of any experiences we may have had with spirits, with psychic phenomena, or with anything outside the norm, really. And I don't really want to scare you, and I don't want you to not be able to sleep tonight. So I would say that the ghost I've experienced, although it was scary because it was completely outside my realm of knowledge at that point. But it was in fact a protective spirit, and it was just protecting its own territory. And this is quite a common phenomena when it comes to spirits. So I'll tell you my tale. No, don't kiss me. Okay, I'm going to change camera angle. So my tale is, once upon a time, when myself and my friends were 14, we went out and we explored a local, must have been older actually, because we drove there. We drove in the middle of the night, And one of our friends was obviously over 17, so we must have been about 16. And we drove one night to a local ruined abbey. And we were in there, and it was Easter Sunday at 1 AM. So we'd gone on the Saturday night and we stayed until Easter Sunday. And we were playing hide and seek in the abbey. And myself and my friends, we were discussing that we thought we'd seen people when we hadn't seen people hanging around behind the pillars. There wasn't a lot left to this abbey. There were some ruined pillars, there was a bit of masonry and an arch which used to be the altar, and then there was the rest of the monastery, which was pretty much flattened. And we were playing around in the main buildings, and it was a full moon, or it was quite bright moon anyway, enough to see by. And we were discussing how we thought we'd seen somebody over there, but there was nobody there. My friend said, yeah, she'd had the same experience. So at that point we were just laughing it off, you know. And we weren't really sure whether we were just, you know, making it up in our own minds. It was when we turned to leave and we had left the building, and we got over the path and we got back onto the path to leave, that I thought I saw something out of the corner of my eye. And my friend did. I can't clearly remember now what happened. And somebody else said, yeah, my friend Liz said, yes, I also thought I saw something over there. And we turned away and we turned towards each other, and once we turned around to look at it, and I got cold shivers just thinking about it, we saw a monk, and he was in the middle of the grass, so it wasn't someone playing a trick. Nobody had managed to run into the middle of a field without us noticing. He was hovering, gliding above the ground, and he was in a white robe with his hood pulled down, and he was coming straight for us. And I just screamed. I screamed and I screamed, and I ran as fast as I'd ever run. And I remember my friend was running faster than me, and I was holding on to, pulling her back. Don't leave me here, which was quite cruel at the time, you know. Totally gonna yank that woman next to me. And we ran. And then we got back to the car and we were talking about it. My friend Liz wanted to go back and explore, and there was no way I was going to go back in the abbey. But we had agreed that it was a spirit who was a guardian that had kind of scared us off from playing around in the grounds so irreverently, especially, and I remember it well, as it was an Easter Sunday. It was almost like a sacrilege to this spirit. Now, I have heard of other people seeing ghosts, and never in my wildest imagination could I believe that I would ever see a ghost. And I've got to say, it is the only ghost I have seen with my physical eyes. It was there, and there were two of us saw it, so we know that we could compare notes, and we both saw it. Our boyfriends had walked off ahead, and we had hung around to say we thought we saw some white shadow, you know, and we were looking in that direction. The boyfriends had gone far ahead and they hadn't seen it at all. Also, I don't think they were of the mindset of open to psychic awareness. Now, myself and my friend Liz had lived in a haunted house with strange things that occurred, things that moved, things that turned round, and footsteps that jumped up the stairs. Now, I actually, many years later, heard the footsteps that she was on about, and there was nobody in the house. She told me for years about the strange phenomena that she'd experienced there. And so we were both sort of psychically open, and I think you have to be in touch with your intuition and your mediumistic senses in order to experience this kind of thing. But so I can honestly say that there is no doubt in my mind that there is a spirit world, and this was formed early on in my life, and since then I've had other strange experiences, spent nights with people in their houses where they've had strange experiences, and so it's not just a personal thing, it has been shared, it has been more than one person experiencing something. So yes, I have seen something that was not of this world or of this time. And also we felt that it was almost a recording. It was triggering a thing that had happened in the past that we were aware of in the present. A simultaneous time-reality blend, if you like. But also this place was a very sacred place. It had, it was built where it was built because of a vision that the abbot received. So it always was a piece of sacred land. And so there was that as well. There was something about the area that was particularly spiritual in a portal kind of way. That's all I can say. So that's my one ghost story of seeing a ghost. I've got several other stories which I may relate as we go along. Some of them are a little bit scarier. Some of them were a little bit less harmful and felt a little less harmful. And some of them were just trying to scare us. And fear feeds off fear. So if you want to attract negative energies, be fearful of them. So in many ways I would say that there is a spiritual world that is parallel to our own world. And a lot of what you might call primitive religions, primitive spiritualities, in fact all spiritualities, have a notion of this other world, this world where when we transcend our body there is still some kind of spiritual life, spiritual being that can remain. It could be a recording of a person or a person's life. It can often be something that inhabits buildings or a place. It could almost be like a recording in many ways that buildings retain. And in many ways there's the concept that spirits are also part of natural places and are natural phenomena, and we would call them fairies, or in Anglo-Saxon they would be called Land Wights, or in Norse mythology they would be called the Land Wight. And the concept would be that these were spiritual elven beings that inhabited certain magical places, certain sacred and powerful places. And as some people would say, these are places where the grass is a little bit brighter, the birds sing a little bit louder, it's a little bit more beautiful, a little bit more tranquil than other places. And these are said to be places that are especially powerful for fairies, elves and land wights. So this begs the question, what are fairies? I think our notion of fairies comes down to us mainly from the Victorian era, where they were reinvented in their entirely saccharine and righteous, God-fearing way as sweet little creatures with wings who lived under mushrooms, who sprinkled their little glittery fairy dust everywhere, making the flowers grow. And although there was the concept well before that of elementals, of spirits in nature that did indeed help nature grow and did control the actions of nature in many ways, these beings were powerful. They weren't little 3-inch balls of glitter, you know. They were to be feared, and they were mighty and powerful beings. So in fact, if you look at many church records from previous centuries, it is recorded on quite a lot of people's death certificates in church records that they died of fright by the fairies. So it was obviously quite a common belief that you could meet fairies on the road, you could meet scary beings who could drag you into the moors, who could, you know, drown you in the bogs, and who could literally frighten you to death. And in many ways these were similar to, you could say, earthbound spirits or poltergeist activity. They were said to be mischievous ghosts that would rattle and bang and cause distress in your home. In many ways these were considered, previous to sort of Victorian era, these were considered boggarts, who were the hobs of the house who had turned negative. Maybe they hadn't received enough food or enough offerings to them. Maybe they'd been angered in some other way, and these could turn into malevolent spirits. But when we look at earlier mythology, the fairies themselves, they are slightly different to the ghosts in that they have a life of their own. They live, they grow, they die. They have fairy weddings, they have fairy funerals, they have fairy feasts. And so it's not the idea of an earthbound spirit, but of an entirely separate life form. So in Norse mythology and in Iceland and Scandinavian and Germanic thought, these elves or Land Wights or Landvættir would be beings that inhabited rocks or caves or waterfalls. And these would be special places, and they would wear these bits of land as we wear bodies. They would inhabit a rock as we inhabit a body. And this was their belief, and so, though of course is the tale of in Iceland even today, although people don't necessarily say they believe in elves, they don't want to anger them just in case. And it was believed that the elves and the fairies and the beings of nature, the elementals and the Landvættir, they would cause bad luck if they were harmed or if their land was in any way disturbed. So you may have heard the tale of what happened in Iceland, where a road was planned to be built and they had to stop the work, and there was some distress about a rock that was in the way, and it was said to be a cathedral of the elves, a particularly sacred place to the elves, which they didn't want to be destroyed. And so people protested until the road authorities actually took this seriously, and they decided at the end of the day to move the rock to another place so that it would not be harmed, so that it was still allowed to be, you know, a an elven cathedral. And so part of the belief was that these elven hills, these elven rocks and elven caves should not be disturbed. In fact, they should remain as natural as possible. And especially on places like elven mounds, fairy hills, you would not cut the wood, you would not cut down a tree on a fairy hill for fear of angering the fae, the elves and the spirits of that land. And they would bring you bad luck, so you really did not want to curse your own life by risking it in many cases. Now, in the case of fairy mounds and fairy hills, these were also the places where the ancestors dwelled, and in many ways the ancestors had turned into the elves, had gone to join the elves in the underworld. And these places would be sought out and kept sacred, not only to honour the tribe and to honour the ancestors who had gone before them, but as places to go to receive healing or wisdom or gifts such as poetry. And of course there's the story of the Mabinogion, where Pwyll goes to sit on the mound of Arbirth, and it's told to him that if he spends the night on a mound, he will either receive a blow or gain a wonder. And of course he sees a wonder. He sees Rhiannon riding out of the fairy mound, who is his spiritual wife, his spiritual lover, his counterpart in the underworlds. And this idea that the ancestors could be sought for guidance and gifts, this was part of the Nordic tradition of Utisita. Now, Utisita means sitting out, and this is where people would go out into the unknown. And there was a time in the early Dark Ages where there were two worlds. There was the known world, which was the Ingarth, and there was the outer unknown world, which was referred to just generically as Outgarth, which is out there, unknown, beyond the boundary of the village, as it were. And you would go out through Outgarth, and you could sit on a barrow mound or a fairy hill, and it was said you could sit there the whole night and receive a wonder or receive some information, or perhaps if you had not honoured the spirits, you would receive a blow. So there was always precaution to treat these places with respect for fear of bad luck. But of course, if you want to do that these days, there's no need necessarily to go and sit all night. I think it's perfectly fine just to go and spend some time in quiet meditation. Although if you want to spend the whole night there, then do, but obviously be wise, be careful. But I like these mounds. I've gone to visit a few in my local area, and you can converse with the being that is in that place, especially if that place is untampered with. It's not really been intruded upon too much by civilization. And I have a little story to tell about once, a few years ago, myself and my partner, friend at that time, he took me on a road trip to Scotland to show me some of his favourite places. And one of the places he took me to was Killmartin Glen. Now, Killmartin is an amazing place. It's covered in barrow mounds, stone circles. There are something like 1,000 monuments in this one valley, many of which are Neolithic. And I don't know if he knew what he was doing, but we went there at the end of the day and he showed me around this place just as it was getting twilight. Now, I think he knew that it was a little bit of a spooky place. And as we know, twilight is traditionally the time when the gates open between the worlds, it being neither one thing nor the other. So times like twilight and dawn, these are in between times, and this is when it's especially good to contact in between worlds. Now, it started getting dark while we were wandering around, and I didn't notice, but he had run away. I think he got scared, and he had gone back to the van and left me there alone. And it wasn't until I just, yeah, that's it. I hung around for another few minutes. I thought, I'm not going to be scared. I'm going to stay here a little bit longer. And I sensed a presence. Yet again, it was like I saw somebody standing there, as you do out the corner of your eye. Was that a person? And I sensed the presence of a being at the entrance of one of the barrow mounds. I didn't see him physically with my eyes, but I sensed him, and he was a Bronze Age king who had come to ask me why I was there and what I wanted to know, what help I was asking, you know, why I was here and what was I asking. And I was a bit taken aback by this, because I wasn't there to ask anything. I was just there to be and to explore. So my first reaction was, oh, I'm sorry, you know, I'll go. And I wasn't scared by him. I was in awe of this being that was in my imagination, in my second sight. And this is how you sense quite a lot of the fairy contact. And I can still sense him and I can still see him. And he became a very archetypal figure in my mind. And he is the sleeping king who is in the earth as a mediary between ourselves and the underworld, between ourselves and our lives, our everyday lives, and the life and world of our ancestors and of the underworld. And so this to me is what a Land Wight is. This is an elven Land Wight who was once a human, who has now returned to the world of spirits as an ancestral Land Wight, an ancestral spirit. So these are what I would consider the elves, especially when it comes to barrow mounds. Of course there are other elves, and these are beings that are now inhabiting rocks and rivers and lakes. And story says that these are the beings that fell out of heaven but didn't go down to hell. This was a biblical explanation, but instead went into the land. Another story is that they were Eve's children, and Eve was embarrassed by them. When God came to visit Eve, some of her children were dirty, and she was too embarrassed to admit to having these children, and so she denied their existence. And so God turned them into the hidden people, the Hulder folk, saying that if Eve was too embarrassed for them to be seen, then she would not see them either, and we would not see them either. But they are still there. And in Nordic belief, these are the Hulder folk, the hidden people. And in many ways, they are spirits of nature that have returned to rocks, to caves, and to lakes. So this strikes me as something I remembered reading a long time ago about the shamans of Siberia, and how they had referred to different soul parts, which, if I remember right, were called souls. And when a person died, they had several spiritual bodies, and one would go to the afterlife, sleeping peacefully, and some could be ancestral spirits that maybe remained within a family line, and one part of the soul would return to nature and would fly into a tree or a rock or a piece of land somewhere. And this is very similar to Norse thoughts about the different parts of the soul that could be inherited ancestrally, or could be called the Fylgja, who is the animal fetch, the spiritual part of a person that is an ancestral spirit that comes in the form of an animal, or could come in the form of a female spirit. And so this idea is that there are many parts of the soul, which is a lot richer than the Christian idea to me, that we have one soul that either goes to heaven or it goes to hell. And of course hell is the Norse word for the underworld. It was never originally a negative place. It was just called hell to demonise the native religion that was there before the Christians tried to re-indoctrinate people. And so the idea that parts of the soul could still continue and become spiritual beings and spiritual parts of life force. So the idea that parts of soul could return to nature and could become spiritual beings and spiritual parts of a person who is living as well. This could also be a spirit, a guide, or a Land Wight. So as we're thinking of Samhain and we're thinking of the ghosts and ghoulies that walk at this time, let's remember that they are in many ways our ancestors and the spirits that are returning at this in-between time and place, which is the end of one year and the beginning of next in the Celtic thought. And so Traditionally we would leave out feasts to pacify them, to keep them happy. We would leave out a jack-o'-lantern to scare away those evil spirits, or alternatively to give them a guiding light to return to. In many ways the jack-o'-lantern is the spirit in the skull, and it relates in many ways to the wisdom and knowledge of the ancestors, and you can see this in the story of Baba Yaga, which I may have mentioned before. Vasilisa has to go into the forest to fetch a brand to relight the fire, and she has to ask the Baba Yaga for the brand, and the Baba Yaga gives her a brand which she brings back in a burning skull, which is bringing back wisdom from the underworld, from the other world, from the land of the goddess Hel, from the land of the crown goddess, and from the land of the dead. And it is the wisdom of the shaman, it is the ability to commune with the ancestors and receive their guidance. So let's bring all this into Samhain as well. It's not just about spooky ghost costumes and, you know, candy in bowls, and it's become a little tacky, and we need to honour and remember our ancestors and fully believe in their existence in a spiritual realm that is beyond our physical realm, and fully greet them and, you know, thank them for returning, and honour the place that we give them, which is this one time of the year to be here and to be with us again. And so thank you, that's my little chat on spirits and ghosts and ancestors, and my little ghost story for Samhain too. So I thank you for listening. If you've got any ghost stories of your own you'd like to share them, please do. I always love ghost stories, and I hope to speak to you again soon. Thanks, bye.